everyone, good afternoon. This is Heather Lewis from Sault College from the International Department. We're very excited to be able to welcome you all to this immigration webinar this afternoon, and we are very grateful to have Elizabeth Long and Zia Sumar joining us from Long Mango G Immigration Law Group. So Elizabeth will be doing the majority of the presenting, and then Zia will also be helping with answering some questions in the question and answer box. So I will pass the microphone, I suppose, over to Elizabeth to explain how the rest of this will go.
Thank you so much, Heather. It's wonderful to be here with you all. Okay, so today what we're going to be talking about really is some of the things that you're going to need to know before you get to PR and also after how to qualify for PR. Okay, I'm going to go through a few concepts first to talk about what you really should know while you are still an international student on your study permit and while you are going to be a temporary resident and perhaps when you're even holding a work permit as well. The first thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about is implied status. Now, implied status is something that is very, very important for you to understand if you are a temporary resident. Temporary resident means that you have a study permit or you have a work permit or you're a visitor. In any of those three categories, there is going to be a time on your document when your status will end in Canada. That's why it's called temporary. And if you wanted to stay in Canada beyond that time, then what you have to do is you have to file an extension of your status before the validity date ends, okay? The website says 30 days. That's a recommendation. That's not the law. The law is as long as you have filed it before it ends, even on the day of, you can stay in Canada on your status until a decision is made. That's called implied status, okay? So let's say that I have a study permit that is valid until August 31st. If I had submitted another study permit extension on August 30th, then I can stay in Canada and continue to study until a decision is made on my study permit. Okay, that's called implied status. Now, what happens if I forgot to extend my status? And on September 1st, I take a look, I'm getting ready for school, and I take a look at my study permit, and I see, oh no, I forgot to extend my status. What happens then? Well, the problem is that on September 1st, I no longer have status then. And if you don't extend your status at that time, then if you don't have status, you won't have the ability to study until you get your status back. So normally, I have 90 days to file a restoration of status, before, after I lose my status. During the restoration period, I'm not allowed to study or work, but I can stay in Canada to wait for the restoration, and hopefully the officer will restore my status as a student. Once I receive that decision, then I can study. Okay, there is a special policy for COVID so that if you are able to, if you lose your status right now, and you have until the end of the year to file the restoration. Normally it's 90 days, but right now it's until the end of the year. If you have lost your status after January of this year, okay? So so this is the restoration. So what that means is if I have lost my status as an international student on a study permit, and I filed a restoration on September 1st. I may lose an entire semester where I can actually study until an officer gives me back the study permit and restores my status. So I may have to skip to January. So that's the difference. If I had filed it one day earlier, before it expired, I could have continued to study this semester. First thing you want to do is make sure you look at your calendar and put that date there. The second concept I want to talk with you guys about is what a high-skilled versus a low-skilled position is. When we talk about permanent residence, you will see that it is very important, for the most part, that you have work experience that is considered high-skilled. Okay, high-skilled in Canada, under the immigration system, is defined by the NOC codes, the NOC codes, okay? National Occupation Classification, NOC. And the NOC codes have divided all of the different occupations into 5 different categories. O, A, and B are high skilled, C and D are low skilled. Okay, so when you're doing a job, you have to know whether or not what you're doing is high skilled or low skilled. I always like to play a little game with you guys to see if you can figure out sometimes what is high skilled and low skilled. Okay, so I'm gonna call out some occupations and you tell me whether you think it's high skilled or low skilled. Let's take an office situation. Receptionist, that's low skilled. A secretary, that's high skilled. Data entry clerk, low skilled. Bookkeeper, high skilled. A accountant, high skilled. Accounting clerk, low skilled. A medical assistant, high skilled. Dental assistant, low skilled. Okay, so as you can see, sometimes it's not very intuitive as to whether or not an occupation is high skilled or low skilled. You really have to go to the NOC codes to determine whether or not your job, your work is going to be high skilled or low skilled. Okay. All right. You know, I have done this this webinar for Sault College. We've done quite a few webinars throughout this time, and every single time that I do it, something different comes up. So what I tell you today is true today, but it very well could change tomorrow, probably by next month. Okay, so it's very important that you do keep up to date on the different changes. We will put you on a listserv, sorry, not a listserv, our newsletter list, and we will let you know once there are changes that happen, okay? But it is, and these are normally like big changes for students. Oftentimes we will send those out, but do make sure that you keep up to date on changes as well, okay? So here is the situation right now as we know it, as it pertains to students. So first of all, if you are outside of Canada, you will already know that for the most part, if all of your classes are online, you're not going to be able to come into Canada right now, just based on your study permit. Even if you have a study permit approval, they likely won't let you in. If you have filed your study permit application from outside of Canada, you are still outside of Canada, you're waiting for your study permit to be issued, you can study online outside of Canada for this semester and have your studies count towards your postgrad work permit as long as your study permit is eventually approved. Okay, now there has been questions as to whether or not if you're a visitor inside Canada currently and you applied for your study permit, whether you can study. It seems to have been confirmed by RCC that you cannot study if you are currently inside Canada, and even if you have received an approval in principle. You know, people, we've asked them and said, you know, distance education is supposed to be, you don't even need a study permit to study, but IRCC has said that, you know, if a course is normally not distance education, it's just online because of COVID, that's not going to be considered distance education. So if you are inside Canada, you don't have your study permit yet, then you are not able to study unless you're on implied status with a study permit that you had before. Okay. If your classes are canceled, you can study part-time, or you can maintain your student status because of COVID. Now, I think this may have been a little bit old because I think most of your classes now are probably restored because of the online, okay? But if you are applying for your study permit inside Canada and you already have, you know, you've already applied for it, right now you are exempt from the biometrics requirement. Watch out for the news, because once the biometric centers are open, they probably will take this away. Currently, they have just announced that for permanent residents, applicants who still need their biometrics, they are now starting to open them up and calling them to arrange for special times for them to do it. They may not do this for temporary residents, so this exemption may still be in place for a while. Like I said, if you are currently in Canada and you were out of status, but you did have status on January 30th, but afterwards you lost your status this year, you have until the end of the year to file the restoration of status. While you are waiting for the restoration of status, however, you are not able to study. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about what you need to keep in mind when you are studying. First of all, you will lose your status after 90 days, okay, if you stop actively pursuing studies. What is actively pursuing studies? Well, actively pursuing studies means that you're enrolled as a full-time student, right? And you're actively pursuing studies. You can stop studying and still actively pursue studies if you are on a scheduled break, like your summer breaks, anything that's on the academic calendar, or you have authorized leave. Authorized leave is basically special leaves given by your school for special reasons, for example, medical reasons, or special personal reasons, and you have to get special permission from the school to give you authorized leave. The authorized leave can be up to 150 days, but you have to keep in mind that when you are on authorized leave, you are not allowed to work at all, full-time or part-time during that time. So, like I said, you have to maintain your status, all right? You don't have an excuse to say, oh, COVID is here, my study permit expired, I can't file. Yes, you can file. You can still do online applications. And as long as you've submitted your application properly, you will have implied status. When I say properly submitted, it means that you have properly submitted the forms, you have properly paid your fees, and you have shown that you have actually pressed the button, you have the confirmation letter, or if you're sending it by mail, that you have a courier slip, and to show that you have actually filed the application. Okay. So let's talk about while you're working while you're studying. So you can only work if you are registered as a full-time student. Like I said, if your classes were canceled because of COVID, you can that's still counted as you're registered as a full-time student, so you can work part-time, okay? The only exception is in the last semester. For some people, you're just missing 1 or 2 classes, and then you have to do that in the last semester. last semester you can be part-time and still actually work on a full-time basis in the last semester. Now, when you have completed your studies, you are no longer going to be a student, so you have to stop working, okay? So once you have completed your studies, the definition of it is the earliest when you get notice from the school that you've completed your studies. So it could be a letter from the school, it could be your transcripts, okay? Whichever comes first, once you receive that, you're no longer a student. You have to stop studying. So in between the programs, the only difference is if you have completed one program and you're going to start another program in 150 days. So for example, if I completed a program in April, and then I've already been accepted to my second program in September. That summer period of time, I can work full-time as well, okay? All right, let's talk about the post-grad work permit. The first question I would say you should ask yourself is not when can I apply for the post-grad, but should I apply for the post-grad work permit right now? The post-grad work permit is really a golden ticket. You can only qualify for one post-grad work permit in your lifetime. It's a very, very valuable thing to hold because it's an open work permit. You can work for anyone that you like. And it's quite easy to get it. You just have to graduate and qualify for it and have studied full-time, etc., and you can get it. It's quite easy to get it, but you can only get it one time, okay? And so the length of your postgrad work permit is very important. If you completed a program between 8 to 12 months, you only get a work permit for that length of time. If you completed a program that is 2 years, between 8 to 2 years, you only get it for that length of time. But if you get it for 2 years or more, then you can get it for 3 years. So, oftentimes people will complete a 1-year program and you're really tired of studying. You've studied a lot, right? You don't want to study anymore. So you will say, okay, I'm just going to go and get a 1-year postgrad work permit afterwards. Before you do that though, you really have to think about it. If my ultimate goal is to stay in Canada and get permanent residence, am I going to be able to get it with just a 1-year work permit? Maybe you need 1-year work experience in Canada in order to have a good chance to get it. And maybe during COVID time, it's really hard for you to find that high skill job. If you can't, right, then after when your postgrad work permit expires, it may be very, very difficult for you to be able to get another work permit afterwards. Remember, the postgrad work permit you can only get once in your lifetime. Afterwards, to extend it, people ask me, how can I extend it? My answer to them is, well, you have to qualify for another work permit, and you may or may not be able to do so, okay? So sometimes when people come to me and they say, should I apply for the postgrad work permit? I sometimes say you can. Other times I say, do another program. If you do another program, so one program plus another program, a 1-year program, added together is 2 years. You can also get a 3-year work permit at the end. So let's talk about how you can qualify for a postgrad work permit, okay? One of the main things you need to do is maintain your full-time status. There are 2 exceptions. One is COVID. If your classes were canceled because of COVID, okay, that semester they'll excuse it. The other one is if you have authorized leave, or if it's the last semester you only have one class to do, right? Sometimes people ask me, Elizabeth, you know what, I'm just having so much difficulty this year, maybe it's my mental health, or maybe I have some health problems, etc. I'm just going to do part-time. What do you think about that? I say, I don't know that that's a great idea to do so. You really put at jeopardy your ability to get postgrad work permit. Sometimes the officers, take into consideration, they might give it to you, but it is quite risky. Instead, what I might suggest is you ask the school to give you authorized leave, rest for a semester, take the entire semester off, and then go back and become a full-time student again. Otherwise, you jeopardize your ability to qualify for the postgrad work permit. Okay, so let's talk about timeline. You've finished your school, your program, you received this letter from the school. You stop working at that point. Now, you say, well, I need to work again, right? What you can do at that point is take that transcript and the letter and apply for your postgrad work permit. As soon as you apply for the postgrad work permit, you are able to work full-time. You don't have to have the postgrad work permit in your hand, okay? As soon as you apply, you can get it. Now, the key is also, there's a deadline as to when you should apply for your postgrad work permit. I am going to tell you the timeline right now. In your mind the deadline should be when, before my study permit expires, or 90 days from when I completed my program, whichever comes first, okay? Now, some of you might say, well, Elizabeth, I checked the website, and the website says I can apply for postgrad work permit within 180 days, okay? I said, yes, that is true. Although for most of you, if all you did was apply, 120 days, right, 179 days, and all you did was apply for your postgrad, likely it will be rejected. Why? Because you lose your status within 90 days of your program ending. Remember, that's one of the first slides we were talking about. If you don't study, you lose your status within 90 days. So if you wait until after 90 days, you wait until 179 days to apply for your study permit, and you have not filed any extension for your visitor status or study permit status, then you'll be out of status. And one of the requirements for you to apply for the postgrad is that you have status in Canada. So if you wait until 180 days to apply for your study permit, for your postgrad work permit, it will be rejected. So keep in mind, you should apply within 90 days. Another reason why I say apply within 90 days is because you have to apply while you still have a valid study permit. And, even if your study permit expires after 90 days, your study permit status will expire after 90 days because of the first condition that I said. Therefore, you cannot work when you are going to apply for your postgrad work permit and waiting for the postgrad work permit, okay? So in essence, keep that deadline in your head. You're going to apply for your postgrad work permit. If your study permit expires before 90 days, you are going to apply before your study permit expires. If your study permit expires after 90 days, you're going to apply before the 90 days is up. And then you can work while you're waiting for your postgrad work permit to be issued. Sometimes people, you like to ask your friends, hey, how did you do it? How did you apply for the postgrad work permit? And some of your friends might say to you, well, I just went to the border and I got my work permit right away. Okay, you might think that's a great idea. Why is Elizabeth saying that I have to wait for my postgrad work permit? Well, right now, you have no choice. During the COVID times, the officers are not allowing you to flagpole. Flagpole means you go to the border, you make a U-turn, and come back and apply for your work permit at the border. They're not allowing you to do that, okay? So you have to apply online, and online right now could take a few months for you to get your work permit. So keep these rules in mind so that you can continue your status and continue to be able to work. All right, so that's enough about the temporary status. Let's talk about some permanent residence. All right, the first thing I want to talk to you guys about is express entry. Most of you probably already heard about express entry, and here's how it works. So first of all, you have to create an online profile. In order to create an online profile, you have to qualify under one of three categories: the Federal Skilled Worker class, Canadian Experience class, or the Federal Skilled Trades class. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, okay, in a little bit. So once you've created your online profile, you can get into the express entry pool, and you'll get a series of points called your CRS points. And they're going to be based on your background and whether or not you have provincial nominee program nomination, and it's express entry linked PNP nomination. So every couple of weeks or so, the government is going to have a draw where they announce the numbers, and also right now they're announcing which category they're announcing the number for, okay? And so if you have, if your score is above the score that they announce and you're in the category that they announce, then you will get the Holy Grail, the invitation to apply, okay? Once you have the invitation to apply is then when you can actually apply and submit your application for permanent residence. So let's break it down. Let's first talk about how to get into the pool. Now, many of you may already, even if you're studying, qualify to get into the pool. I have clients who qualify for permanent residence even if they have never been to Canada, okay? And they qualify under the Federal Skilled Worker class, and this is how it works. So first of all, you need to have 1 year of high-skilled, full-time work experience that is continuous and in one occupation. 1 year of high-skilled, not O, A, or B, full-time, at least 30 hours a week, continuous, no breaks, in one singular occupation for at least 1 year, okay? If you have that work experience, you also need some financial savings. Normally, if you're individual, you're going to need around 13,000. If you add family members, accompanying family members, you're going to probably add to 3,000 or so for each family member. And then we do a calculation of the rest of your background. And you know, if you're a student, normally you probably would qualify if you already have a degree, to make sure that you have enough to score at least 67 points on the Federal Skilled Worker Program scale. This has nothing to do with, it's not the same as the express entry skills, Federal Skilled Worker scale, okay? So notice what I didn't say about the work experience. I didn't say to qualify you had to work in Canada. You can use work experience from anywhere in the world. It can also be self-employed work experience as well. And can also be work experience that you gain as a student. So for example, we have a lot of students who might have been working while they're studying and they were working in high-skilled positions, and we can use that to put you into the pool to qualify for this, okay? This is the Federal Skilled Worker Program. This is very different from the second program that you could qualify for, which is the Canadian Experience class. To qualify for the Canadian Experience class, you need to have at least 1 year of high-skilled, full-time work experience that is gained in Canada while you are an employee after, when you are not a full-time student. Okay, so 1 year of high-skilled, full-time, at least 30 hours a week. Now, if you're doing part-time, you can add that all together. Okay, so if I did 15 hours, I can do 2 years of 15 hours and still add it together. Okay, full-time, you have to be an employee in Canada, being an employee means you get a T4, you get your income tax deducted. So that's very important to have that, okay? You don't really want to work as a contractor. You can work on a contract basis where it's not a permanent job, it's a contract basis for 1 year or 2 years, etc. That's okay. But you cannot be a contractor. What a contractor means is that you are self-employed and you are being contracted with them, and they're going to pay you money, but they're not going to make any income tax deductions from the amount of money that they're giving you. Okay, so you have to be an employee, and it can't be experience gained while you are a full-time student. When you're not a full-time student, then you can calculate the work experience, okay, including the work experience that you have when you finish your program and you're waiting for your postgrad work permit, you file the postgrad work permit, you're waiting for it, that work experience can be counted. You also need to pass a language exam. Oh, for the federal skilled worker, you also need to pass the language of 6.0 in your IELTS for each category. But the languages for these categories is not as significant really as what we're going to talk about for languages to get out of the pool, okay? Because you probably likely need a lot more to get out of the pool. Also skilled trades as well. Now skilled trades we don't do as often for students because you will likely qualify under other categories. Skilled trades means you have to have an LMIA or provincial certification in order to qualify under one of the specified trades. So it would be normally the construction trades or chefs or cooks, okay? Well, if you have one of these positions, let me know and we can speak a little bit more about that. But usually the students, because you don't get an LMIA or provincial certification, you won't qualify under this. Okay, so that's to get into the pool. Now, I have 4 people, for example, who are in the pool. Juan has 415, Anna has 401, Jean has 436, and Trupti has 501, okay? If the draw was for Canadian experience class and the draw was for 432, who's gonna get through? Well, you say, well, Jean and Trupti may get through. Maybe if Trupti or Jean didn't get in under Canadian experience class, they got in under federal skilled worker class, then neither of them would get through, okay? So before we had draws usually where they had no specific category. Everybody in the pool got drawn. If everybody in the pool got drawn, then for example, the last draw was 472, right? And it was no differential, everybody had a chance, then Trupti would for sure get through. But if they specify, and during COVID, they have started to specify a lot more, especially for Canadian experience class, then the people who have Canadian experience class would have a much better chance to get through, okay? So what gives you the points? First of all, the age. Your age after you get to your 30s, it really goes down. Every single year, for 30s, it goes down 5 or 6 points. In your 40s, -10, -11. By the time you're 45, the good news is it doesn't go down anymore. The bad news is that it's 0. Okay, so not a lot you can do about age except you should apply when you're younger so that your age points are not going to drop. Education right now, if you don't have any Canadian work experience, then really we would look at if you have 2 degrees or more, one of them having at least a 3-year degree. Okay, language is very, very important. Generally, we are looking at people, if you don't have Canadian work experience, then you're looking at least a 7 in reading, writing, and speaking, and 8 in listening, if not more. Okay, if you do have Canadian work experience, then you might be okay if your points are slightly less. The relevant Canadian work experience that I keep talking about, it's the same kind of work experience that's defined under the Canadian experience class. Except under Canadian experience class, you have to apply within 3 years and get that work experience within 3 years. To get the points for this, it's within the last 10 years. Foreign work experience that's high skilled can also give you points as well. Spouses, we do calculations for people who are, single and who have a spouse. If you have a spouse that is really a super spouse, they have very high education, high language skills, they may have some Canadian work experience, and that's good. They overall score, you might be a little bit higher as a couple, but if not, then you might be a little bit lower as a couple. Okay. Provincial nominee programs. Now, people sometimes get confused. If they think, oh, if I'm nominated under any provincial nominee program, I get 600 points for express entry, right? No, only express entry linked provincial nominee programs will give you 600 more points. So be very careful about that. We're going to talk a little bit more about provincial nominee programs. Previous study in Canada, if you study at Sault College, you get 15 points, right? So that could be very significant. And arranged employment. People often think, oh, I have a job offer, therefore I have arranged employment, right? No. If you are a student, you have a post-grad work permit, that's an open work permit. You will not get arranged employment points. To get arranged employment points, you need to have either an LMIA or an employer-specific work permit. Now, a lot of students come to me and they say, well, I think I can ask my employer to do an LMIA for me. LMIAs are very specific. They require the employer to recruit Canadians and show that they can't find a Canadian to do the job. Most students probably won't be that skilled that they can do that. Also, they need to meet median wage for the salary, okay? Unless you're very, very specialized or you're working in a field where there aren't really that many Canadians who can do the job, there's a real shortage of labor, LMIAs are going to be very tough to get. Some people who are from free trade countries, for example, free trade agreement countries, for example, Mexico, the US, Colombia, Peru, Japan, Australia, there's others, Korea, Panama. There are different things where if you have a job offer as one of the professionals that are there, we could get you a work permit without your employer having to do an LMIA as well. If you have siblings who are Canadian or permanent residents in Canada, you get 15 points for that. Ability to speak fluent French is quite important. If you can do that. Now, some people, you have zero French and you say, well, I'm going to go study French. Now, unless you were extremely, extremely talented, I don't think that would be a great idea, because you have to actually not just speak, but read, write, and listen in a very, very high level in order to get the points, significant points for French, okay? Trade certification, that is only with regard to the trades, the provincial certifications there, okay? So some of you looking at this list may think, well, I think I'm pretty good. I have a lot of most of what you're saying. I might be pretty good. That's great. Come over and we'll do an evaluation. If you're good, put yourself in the pool. Now, other people hearing what you're saying, you may feel like, crying a little bit because it may not be great for you. Okay, that's all right. We have some other things that we could talk about. Okay, first thing I want to talk about is express entry linked streams with the OINP, the Ontario Provincial Nominee Program. So these are things where if you are in the pool, in the express entry pool, but you have not really received an invitation to apply yet, your points are relatively high, just not high enough. Maybe you have 450, for example, and you're in the pool, just not high enough, okay? Well, Ontario has these programs where they're going to look to see whoever's in a pool, and if you have an interest to live in Ontario, they might send you an expression of interest to apply with them for 600 points. So who is it that they are interested in? First of all, there is the human capital one. The human capital one is one where we're not exactly sure who they want to pick. They also may not be exactly sure themselves who they want to pick until at that time. They have identified tech occupations as occupations that they like. And oftentimes they also invite other occupations because they feel there's a shortage for other occupations as well. Sometimes they have invited people who have job offers, etc. Okay. However, every time they have this draw, doesn't mean that just because you have experience in one of the tech occupations that you will get drawn. They still look at what your actual number is, and they still have a cutoff number for that. It might be a little bit lower than express entry draws. Okay. Also, you need to, in order to qualify, you must have a bachelor's degree as well. It doesn't have to be from Canada. It could be from outside of Canada as well. Skilled trades. So if you have been in one of the trades, mostly it's the construction trades in Ontario for at least 1 year in the past 2 years, and trades in the construction, and I think baker as well. And you have at least 1 year of work experience in one of these occupations, then they may invite you to apply with them. Okay, so construction trades is actually a pretty good one for immigration. It's a recognized need especially in Ontario, that we need trades as well, bakers too. Okay. The third one is for people who speak French. You French speakers are so lucky with regard to immigration. There are quite a lot of programs, especially dedicated to you French speakers, okay? So if you have a pretty high level for French and also a pretty good level in English, and you have a bachelor's degree and you're in the pool, you might get selected. Now your numbers again have to be above a certain level, normally at least above the 400s, in the 400s, in order to be picked. But you do have a chance through that way. If you are picked, like I said, you can apply with the OINP, and once they approve your application, you get 600 more points to add to your express entry points, which will assure you to be able to get an invitation to apply. Now, I'm going to talk about the employer-based programs, which are not express entry, okay? The employer-based programs that are not express entry have become very, very popular in the past couple of years because of the fact that they're not express entry based. And for the most part, if you have that job offer, you don't have to do any English exams. They don't look at your age, etc. That's why they've been so popular. But there are some changes that are coming through. So first of all, to qualify right now, the basic qualification is you have to have an employer who's offering you a permanent full-time job, okay? If it's outside of the GTA, the income is $500,000 last year for the previous fiscal year, at least 3 full-time Canadian permanent resident employees in the location, and the business has been in business for 3 years. Inside the GTAs, over $1 million for income, 5 full-time Canadian permanent resident employees be in business for 3 years. That's the employer. Okay, now after that, there are 3 categories. If you graduate and you're an international student and you graduate, you can get, you can qualify for this if you apply within 2 years of your graduation. Now, the job has to be high skilled and it has to meet the entry level wage for your occupation. Okay? If you are not an international student, you can still qualify, or you've applied after 2 years of your graduation, you can still qualify under the skilled worker one, the foreign worker one. It has to be high skilled, you have to meet median wage salary, and you have to have at least 2 years of work experience in the occupation in the last 5 years. There's another one called in demand. So in demand is the only one that I have spoken about that is going to be in the low skilled categories. But the in demand categories, they're very, very specific occupations in there. It's not all low skilled, okay? There are specific ones, for example, farm workers. If you're outside of the GTA, there are more, they've added more like sewing machine operators, some of the construction laborers, etc., truck drivers, personal support workers, etc. Okay, so that there are specific occupations on that list. And if you have 9 months of work experience in Ontario in that occupation, then you could qualify. Now, this looks great, right? To a lot of people, it looks great, better than the express entry. Here is the issue. Because it has been so great, in the last year, when these applications have been opened, they've only been open for a few minutes before they've closed, because the government just gets a whole like crazy amount of people applying. Even if you try to get in and your bandwidth is not very high, you're not going to be able to get in. Okay, so what the government is going to plan to do is they are going to likely put in another EOI system. They're currently talking about it. We're discussing it with them about what kind of system to put in to sort of be more selective. And so, things like what kind of job offer you have, English levels, your education will still become a factor as well. How much they will be remains to be seen. Okay, so we're gonna put you on our list. When this new system comes out, we'll send out a newsletter to you guys to tell you guys about the new program. And if you're not on the list, you want to join on the list, please go to our website as well. We have a link there to sign up for our newsletter list. Okay. Okay, so that is the OINP. Now, this is another pilot that for Sault students is really good because there are only a few communities who this will apply, okay? So first of all, you have to get a recommendation from a participating community, including Sault Ste. Marie. You have to have at least 1 year of qualifying work experience, or if you don't have work experience, you've graduated at least from a 2-year program in Sault College, then you could qualify without work experience. One of the main things though is you have to have a qualifying job offer and score at least 70 points on the community requirement. Okay, so there is an occupations list. You should be on the occupations list. If it's not, maybe there might be some leeway, but they really encourage you to see if your occupation is on that list, okay? And it needs to be full-time, non-seasonal, meet entry-level wage for the occupation. So there are some requirements for that job offer. You also need to meet a language benchmark. If you've gotten into Sault College, that shouldn't be too much of an issue. But this is something that is good if you are going to Sault College and you have that job offer, we might be able to get you through under this program. So, and you have to work in Canada or have settlement funds as well, okay? So one last program that I want to talk to you guys about is the Caregiver program. They are probably going to come up with another announcement about the Caregiver program in a short while as well. You know, this is the thing about immigration programs in Canada. Their changes are so fast right now because they don't go through Parliament to make changes to these programs. So they can just announce changes to the program. You know, right now, the Caregiver program, if you have 2 years of work experience taking care of children, elderly, or disabled people in their home, and you have at least a 1-year post-secondary credential. Now, this work experience should be after you've completed your program, but if you get a post-grad work permit and you take care of someone, or if your spouse has a work permit, open spousal work permit, and they're taking care of someone in their home, children, elderly, someone who's disabled in their home for 2 years, right? You have 1-year post-secondary education credential, language CLB of 5 shouldn't be an issue if you're going to Sault College. Then you can qualify for permanent residence under the Caregiver program. Okay, so talked a lot about different options, different things you have to keep in mind. Let me summarize and give you a plan, okay? Next step, what do you need to do? First of all, you have to have a plan, okay? How are you gonna get to your immigration goals? When people come to us for a consultation, we often have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C, because things change a lot, your life will change a lot, but there are certain things that you may need to pivot, okay? So if you can't apply right now, you will have a plan A, but you also need to keep in mind, what if this doesn't work? I need to have a plan B as well, okay? 2, once you have that plan, you gotta get there, okay? So make sure you're doing things like you're studying for your exams for IELTS. It looks like your English exams, your IELTS, CELPIP, French exams, TEF, those things are going to be very important, even with Ontario Immigrant Nominee programs as well. So make sure you are going to study for them and get the results that you need, right? For study programs, if you need to do a 2-year program or you need to do another 1-year program to get the post-grad work permit, you may need to do that. Be prepared for that, right? And like I said, on your post-grad, the length of your post-grad can be very important in order for you to be able to get the eligibility to get PR. There is nothing sadder than when someone comes to my office after being in Canada, having studied in Canada, and been in Canada afterwards, and maybe even worked in Canada, but the job didn't really qualify them for permanent residence, and come at the end of the post-grad work permit and say, what can I do? And there's not a lot they can do except leave Canada, right? So make sure you know what you need to do and make sure you do that. Stay in status. I can't emphasize this to you guys enough. If you are not in status and you continue to study or you work in Canada, you are going down a really, really hard path that it will be very difficult for me or any other lawyer to pull you out of, okay? Make sure you obey the law. and you stay in status. Understand when your status ends and understand what you need to do to extend your status. If your application is rejected, you must contact a lawyer right away. There are notice periods of 15 days from the date of rejection. Okay, if we don't file a notice within 15 days of you getting a rejection to federal court, then you will lose your opportunity to ever do so. And IRCC, so, people sometimes, we are so used to the normal world that we think the government and everyone is kind of like, Amazon, or, IRCC has a call center. Why don't I just call them and complain if they reject my application, right? And I call, and the officer might be nice, right? They might say, okay, yeah, okay, so this is what happened. Okay, so why don't you just write in a letter and explain yourself, okay? You write in a letter, you don't really know, what exactly to write. You don't really understand why exactly you're rejected. You write a letter to immigration. That is called a reconsideration. And if an officer looks at that and they reject your reconsideration request, and then you come to me and say, Elizabeth, okay, this is what I did. They rejected my letter. Now, can you help me? If I then write a proper reconsideration request to immigration, they will likely say, no, you already had one kick out of the can. You already filed a reconsideration. We're not going to consider you a second time. Okay? So make sure, because this is no laughing matter. It's not some small matter. This is something very, very important. You must make sure that you do things professionally and properly. Okay, immigration is not on your side. They may be very, very nice. They may be Canadian nice, but they're not necessarily on your side. Okay, make sure that you understand the officer is there to assess the situation as is presented to them. You must present your situation properly. And also, maybe you were wrong and you didn't meet the qualifications. You will need to file restoration of status within a proper period of time. If you don't apply within the restoration period, then you're completely out of status, and you may not have a way to stay in Canada anymore. Okay, so contact, as soon as you get any sort of rejection, contact a lawyer right away. All right, so this is our contact information. If you have some questions, you want to book a consultation, we always offer discounted rate for students who have coming from Sault College and have come to our webinars. And we also have a update page at the bottom there to, in case you want to know about some updates. We do try to keep it updated as much as possible. All right, so Zia, do we have some questions?
Yes, we've got some great questions. So I'll jump right in. Elizabeth, can you go over, you talked about having 90 days at the end of your studies. Can you go over that whole timeline again as to when your status expires, when you have to apply for your post-grad work permit by?
Sure. So you finish your program, you finish your exams. Okay, at that point, you can still work. You're still a full-time student because you don't have your grades yet. Once you have your grades and you have a letter saying that you've completed your program, either one of those, the first thing that you get, then you have to stop working because you're no longer going to be a full-time student. You met your program requirement. You have to stop working. You can start working again as soon as you file your application for your postgrad work permit. Now, the deadline to file your postgrad work permit, like I said, should be the earlier of either your study permit expiring or 90 days from the time that you first received that notice that you completed your program.
Okay, perfect. And so what about students right now who are starting a program, but they're outside of Canada and they're starting only a 1-year program, are they still going to qualify for that postgrad work permit?
Yes, so there is a special provision that they have just put into place that if you have, if you start studying in this semester and you are studying this semester and next semester outside of Canada, but you have applied for your study permit and eventually you have a study permit approval at the end, then you will be eligible for a postgrad work permit, even if the entire year is outside of Canada. If it is longer than 1 year, then when the borders hopefully open afterwards, you are going to be expected to come into Canada to study for the second half of that. But that whole time, well, if it's whole program is 2 years, then you are entitled to the 3-year work permit at the end.
Okay, great. Now, what about if I have, so I've started a program, I finished one program, my study permit is still valid for another year, and I want to start a second program at it could be at the same school, a different campus. Do I need to do anything to let IRCC know in order to switch?
Yes, so if your study permit originally was for the first school and it hasn't expired yet and you want to switch programs to another school or another campus, you should let IRCC know, I believe through the web form, right, Zia? Through the web form that you're switching. You don't need another study permit if it says that it's like all DLIs on your study permit, but just let IRCC know through the web form that you're switching programs.
And if I'm between programs, can I work?
If you are between programs, it's within 150 days, you finished one program, you've been accepted by another program, then you can work in between the programs.
Perfect. If I'm doing my entire program online, it could be, let's say, I started before all this COVID stuff happened, so maybe January of 2019, and now my program's gone online. It might be a year or a year and a half program, but I'm physically inside of Canada. Will that affect my eligibility for the postgrad work permit?
No, you should be fine. So if your program went online because of COVID, you're inside Canada, and you're still doing your classes, you'll be fine. You'll qualify for the postgrad work permit. I'm just going to have a caveat in that IRCC has not yet come out with the policy on those 15 points that you get for studying in Canada for express entry yet, because there is a special policy for that right now where it says that you, I believe you have to have at least half of your program that is not online. I think they will come out with a policy to make sure that you guys can get the 15 points, but that still remains to be seen.
Perfect. Thank you, Elizabeth.
All right, Heather, anything else to add or anything?
No, I think that covers the majority of the questions. I'd just like to thank you again, both of you, very much for your time today and for answering student questions. It's a huge help to us and to our students and to our recent graduates. So thank you very much for your time, for your presentation, and for answering questions.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much, Heather. Thank you, Zia.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks.